Greetings and welcome back to the No Channel. My name is Bernadette Johnson and I'm also known as Kazaya or Kizzy. Today I'm coming to you with another book commentary on the book From Babylon to Timbuktu, a history of ancient black races including the Black Hebrews by Dr. Rudolph or Windsor. Now, if you heard my previous book commentary on the Valley of Dry Bones, just like that book, this book From Babylon to Timbuktu is a book that's those who are in the knowledge, who've been in the knowledge for a while, are well aware of. So this commentary is more for those who are very new in the knowledge. And this book is also written by Dr. Rudolph Windsor. So now, From Babylon to Timbuktu, it's an awesome and eye-opening read, and to make it even better, it's an easy read for most reading levels. And it goes into great detail about the highly advanced ancient Black Afro-Asian civilizations and the major contributions these civilizations made to the world. And it talks of how these civilizations such as Ghana and Mali flourished while Europe lived in the Dark Ages. This narrative shows how the ancient history of the so-called black people have been suppressed, and much of the world is ignorant of the fact that the ancient Hebrews, Mesopotamians, Phoenicians, and the Egyptians were in fact black nations. Along with these nations, Dr. Renzer shows that the ancient Arabs were black, unlike the tan Arabs we see today. The Arabs we see today, they're mixed. They got mixed up. But actually there's still some black Arabs. Of course, the media, they try their best to hide them, but there's still some black Arabs around. And what's most intriguing about this read is how our writer goes into, detail describing the ancient Hebrews and their journey from Canaan and Egypt and finally to the Americas. It tells how the Hebrews were constantly on the move due to commerce and persecution. He goes on to show how the Hebrews' constant moving fits in with the scripture passage, and among these nations thou shalt find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest. And you can read this in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 65. And this book shows how much of ancient history has been whitewashed by the present white ruling powers to prove their racial superiority and to make black people believe that they were always in power. And of course, this couldn't be further from the truth. So in whiting out the ancient civilizations, they knew they would also have to white out the Hebrews, because the Hebrews lived among these ancient nations and were sometimes mistaken to be one of these nations. For instance, there are instances in the Bible where Israelites were mistaken as Egyptians. For instance, Moses was mistaken as an Egyptian, and also the Apostle Paul. And this book also explains why the powers that be didn't stop until they completely stripped the Hebrews of their true identity and forbade them to practice their faith and traditions. And for those who didn't comply, face death, torture, or slavery. And you know this if you read the history when our ancestors were brought over to the Americas, they were forbidden to practice their religions and their traditions that they practiced when they were over in on the African continent. And then another thing that Dr. Windsor talks about is, and he also says that many scholars, so he's not the only one, he says that many scholars believe that the Hyksos people and not the native Egyptians were in power when Joseph and later his family migrated from Canaan to Egypt. And this is why the Israelites were shown such favor, because it was the Hyksos, who were foreigners, were ruling Egypt at the time. They had for a while they had conquered Egypt, And now this is, yeah, history shows this, that the Hyksos, they had conquered Egypt for a while and was ruling in Egypt. And like the Israelites are a Shemitic people, meaning they were descended from Shem, which was one of Noah's sons. The Hyksos were also a Shemitic people. So he and other scholars were saying this is why Joseph and his brethren were shown such favor. And to support this claim, he points out that the Pharaoh Amos the first, who was a native Egyptian, and who was the first king of the 18th dynasty, expelled the Hyksos, when he came into power, and established a fascist type government which fits in with the new Pharaoh who knew not Joseph, in his order to kill all male Hebrew babies. And you can find this in Exodus chapter 1 verses 8 through 16, where all the Hebrew babies are being killed. But, however, I have some issues with this claim, because if the Hyksos were in power, why would Joseph instruct his brethren on how to answer the Pharaoh about their occupation? Because if read in Genesis, the Joseph's brethren were shepherds. So Joseph told his brethren to, when Pharaoh asked them, what they do for a living occupation, he say that don't, answer, carefully, because every shepherd was considered an abomination to the Egyptians. But the Hyksos were called shepherd kings. So if the Hyksos are ruling, why would being a shepherd would be an abomination to them? So that part doesn't quite add up. And you can read about this in Genesis 46 verses 33 through 34, where Joseph instructs his brothers on how to answer the Pharaoh. And also, in the book of Jasher, now the book of Jasher, you won't find it in the Bible. It was a book that was removed from the Bible, but it is mentioned in the Bible in two places: in Joshua chapter 10 verse 13, and also in 2 Samuel chapter 1 verse 18. It mentions the book of Jasher. Now, the book of Jasher that we have today, I'm not exactly sure if that's the actual book that are mentioned in the Bible. And some also question the validity of the book of Jasher. But anyway, in this book of Jasher, one of the Pharaoh's wise men, and this was when the Israelites were under captivity, in captivity in Egypt. And one of Pharaoh's wise men, who was advising him on how to deal with the Israelites, one of the wise men told Pharaoh how his grandfather raised Joseph above all princes of the land of Egypt. Now, that would mean, now this is this Pharaoh's grandfather. That would mean that the Pharaohs who showed Joseph and his family favor, and the Pharaohs who later oppressed the Hebrews, were of the same stock. So if this, book of Jasher, if this is true, then that would disprove that it was the Hyksos who were in power during this time. But, in spite of all of that, this is still a very informative read, and I would highly recommend it. And you should be able to find it at Amazon or Barnes and Noble or any online bookstore. And you might can find it at your local library. So that's my commentary on From Babylon to Timbuktu. And thank you for watching. And until next time, and also, if you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And until next time, stay blessed.